Urban legends are things we all grew up on at one point in our lives at least, especially for those of us born between 2000 and 2005. Back then when the scariest things were Jeff the Killer and the Smile Dog. Now it's body dysmorphia and taxes, but in all seriousness a lot of urban myths or legends originated from a time before we even had the internet. Legends passed down from generation to generation. However, since the creation of Wi-Fi, a lot has been made. Most of us can tell what's fake or not, but there are some that made folks in the early days actually question this. One of the most popular being the Loch Ness Monster. The internet wasn't even a thing yet, and in 1934, a popular picture left many confused and somewhat horrified for decades until they finally came clean about it being a hoax. Now this obviously resembles a plesiosaur of some sort. As a matter of fact, there are many different urban myths or legends about prehistoric animals, Rex being a famous one, but none have beaten Nessie, and although that submarine and fake head wasn't the real deal, what if it was? Could the Loch Ness Monster actually survive in today's environment? And no, the water horse doesn't count even though the movie is goated. I mean, it's one of the more famous marine reptile classes next to the mosasaurs. So could a strong-necked barrel-bodied plesiosaur eke out a living in today's oceans? Well, we're about to find out. It may have had to deal with giant marine crack lizards back then, but today's oceans are that safe either. Actually, it's a lot worse if you put us into the mix. So I'll be taking one of the more popular plesiosaurs, being the Elasmosaurus, and dropping it randomly in one section of our planet to see if you can just make it. Just before we get into the stats, if you enjoy this sort of content, consider leaving a sub and also join the Discord. But if you're just here for the video, welcome to it. Boy, that was a yapathon. Let's finally get into this. There were different species of Elasmosaurus, but the most common was Elasmosaurus platyurus. I butchered that, but we will move on, which existed in the late Cretaceous some 80 to 66 million years ago along the western interior seaway in what is now North America. Alright, so out of all my come back to life animals, this one size is probably the hardest, well in terms of a definitive weight. As of right now, most reputable sources give it a length of 38 feet and around 2 tons, with a haul type pushing this to 45 feet or more and possibly 4 to 5 tons. But then there are other sources that claim 10 tons or more. Usually I'd overlook non-confirmed sources, but there's one from someone called Max Hawkthorne who gave an interesting rebuttal. They compared the main body plan of the Elasmosaurus to that of a leatherback and scaled it up to the main body. Now it can't exactly be the same because the shell makes up a good amount of the weight, etc, which he says, but in general, based on the length of the animal and summarizing its weight in total, the body alone would be at least 6 to I hate brain rot, would be at least 6 to 7 tons, and the rest of the animal would be an additional 3. You could kinda understand where he's coming from, but I'm not sure about this 100%. He's gotten Wikipedia to change the size, so he said, I can't find it, but that doesn't count because I'm terrible at finding weights in articles. Anyway, this counts for something, but the thing is that Elasmosaurus wasn't one of the bulkier plesiosaurs. There were some like Myosaurus? Yeah, I butchered that too, who also have weights thrown all over, but the lowest placed them at 10 tons. Granted, they are like 15 feet longer than Elasmosaurus, but even if we upscale Elasmosaurus' max size to that of the other plesiosaur, it still wouldn't weigh as much. And also there's some Reddit and Facebook groups saying this guy has given some pretty wild takes and doesn't show proof, such as a 70 foot long mosasaur fossil, but he can't give proof or sources. So even though it is somewhat possible for Elasmosaurus to weigh over 7 tons, I'll play it safe and say at the heaviest it was at least 5 tons, and even this is pushing it. So if I am in fact wrong and Elasmosaurus is like 10 to 15 tons, I apologize in advance for my incompetence. Size up to the way Nessie was horrifying to look at, but with that said, it was mainly feeding on fish and cephalopods. Not saying you're safe because a 200-pound human would be light work, but you wouldn't be the main target. Its flippers could move independently and give this animal amazing agility, almost like a seal, even though seals' tail account for most of their turning. Anyway, you get the point. This and its massive neck, which is like half the length, allowed it to catch fish easily once in range, and once a fish is caught, it isn't going anywhere. Its teeth were literally like massive needles, a little more dense, but they were sharp and meant to hook slippery prey. With this in mind, it also had to try avoiding not becoming prey itself, since of course the real rulers of the late Cretaceous seas were a different group of marine reptiles entirely called the mosasaurs, and 2 of the largest species happened to exist at the same time, so Elasmosaurus had to watch out for them, and the salmon shark and crack, Cretoxorhina, especially juveniles. Speaking of, Elasmosaurus, like many other marine reptiles, gave birth to live young, although it wasn't as many as others like the mosasaurs, who could have like half a dozen or more in some cases. But like a lot of the other plesiosaurs, it likely gave birth to one massive baby, with a gestation period likely over a year. But here's the interesting part, their bodies were so specialized that many think they actually raised their young for a certain period of time, like marine mammals, and possibly even traveled in groups. It isn't confirmed, but it's something many have suggested. Most specimens of Elasmosaurus and other plesiosaurs are isolated, There are some instances where different individuals were found in a similar area, but it's unclear if it was true grouping behavior or if they just passed in the same place, like many other prehistoric animals. But the thought is pretty cool at least. But my favorite thing about these guys is their stone-eating abilities. Call me boring, but something about a giraffe-necked, barrel-shaped boy eating rocks brings me joy for some reason. It's a universal thing among the entire plesiosaur group, or most of it. These stones are gastrolytes, aid in digestion, and also act as buoyancy control. Some animals today do it as well, crocodilians being a famous example. Sadly, it along with all the other straw-necked fish assassins died out because of the, well, you know what. Luckily for you, as always, I have the ability to bring them back. How, you may ask? That's none of your business, just watch the video. Due to their egregiously long gestation period and number of pups, I'll be dropping 10 pairs. However, it's going to be 8 males and 12 females, just so they have a better chance. Where will I drop them exactly? Well, it's not going to be where they originally found, that's for sure. Aside from that sea not existing anymore, the oceans around the US and Canada don't have the temperature these guys would need to live comfortably. Yes, during some parts of the year the temperature is warm enough for these guys, but for the other parts, it's straight unbearable for something like Elasmosaurus, who was built for warmer waters. Other plesiosaurs or even other Elasmosaurus species did have adaptations to live in colder frigid waters, like the Northern Europe species. But not to fear, Godzilla should be more than comfortable sharing his home. Well, he doesn't have a choice. Nor does in Japan, it's the waters of the eastern South Pacific, encompassing the Galapagos Islands. If you're wondering where the Godzilla talk is coming from, come on, you're telling me you didn't get the marine iguana reference? Anyway, these islands are some of the most unique in the world, formed of volcanic residue, and the waters surrounding them are even more biodiverse. The subtropical waters ranging from 24 to 28 degrees would be a good spot for the Elasmosaurus, and the fish stock, oh the fish stock, would be more than the Elasmosaurus could imagine, but there's a catch. The competition is insane, and when I mean insane, I mean it's insane. Like out of all the oceans I've referenced before, none have animals gunning for the exact same stock as much as these islands, and the waters surrounding the islands have some of the highest shark numbers in the world of many different species. With that fun fact out of the way, let's drop these geeked out marine reptiles into the present. So since there's no definitive proof saying they traveled in groups, I won't just make this one big pod, but in the spirit of there actually being a chance they did, I'll say they do it in clusters, spread out around the area. Maybe 4 in one area, 5 in another, you get the gist. There's shallow areas, reefs and deep parts where they can move freely, and gathering stones wouldn't be a problem, and all of these locations have fish which Elasmosaurus would need to catch in order to feed. There are many different species of fish. If I listed all in this video, it wouldn't be completed in a week, but the main species Elasmosaurus would target are sardines, javali, anchovies and tuna. Of course there are other species that can't supplement their diet, but these would be the main targets, and Elasmosaurus' hunting strategy and agility would allow it to catch them easily. If the theory of its body being a distraction while its tiny in comparison head snatches unsuspected prey is true, then it should make short work of these. But here's where competition comes into play. Sometimes massive bait balls form, usually of sardines that attract many different predators. Sea lions are usually the first ones on the scene. Sometimes they catch fish here and there in the bait ball, but more often than not they wait for the dolphins and they work together, or the seals just leech off the dolphins' technique. Then more animals will join. Sharks of many different species, seabirds and even tuna soon flock together, and in that moment, each predator is usually forced on the bait ball until it runs out. Then some predators may eventually turn on each other. None of these would really be a threat to the Elasmosaurus, and this entire situation may actually be something the reptile is used to. In the late Cretaceous, similar instances likely happened with different predators, corralling fish and picking off stragglers until the ball finally got smaller. Only this time, the Elasmosaurus could actually turn a lot of these into food. Some shark species could also fall prey to the Elasmosaurus like the whitetips and possibly even small Galapagos sharks, but unlikely. The rest like the hammerhead, bull and tiger sharks likely wouldn't be worth the effort, especially since the marine reptiles will likely be dominant in the feeding frenzy and collect most of the fish stock. Its diet won't be restricted to fish and squid though. Water birds who won't make it out in time could fall victim to the Elasmosaurus. A medium-sized sea lion would be an option if desperate, but the Elasmosaurus itself could get bullied off if the larger cetaceans on migration come in and swallow a large portion of the fish. Humpbacks and blue whales sometimes pass these waters on migration, and sperm whales are semi-permanent residents here, but their prey and hunting style would keep them out of range of the Elasmosaurus. Then there's whale sharks, who won't necessarily compete with the reptiles but would be an intimidating figure to the Elasmosaur. However, not all animals are just intimidating, some are actually threats. Around the Galapagos, there aren't really any shark species that can mess with an adult head on. Great white adults don't usually travel here, so the largest year-round species is the tiger shark, which at max can reach a ton, and even this is rare. But of course, the current rulers of today's oceans also travel here. That's right, killer whales spend some time around the Galapagos Islands before moving on. and unfortunately for the marine reptiles, this ecotype is a strictly piscivore. The orcas around the island are the ETP ecotype, meaning they eat basically everything: dolphins, seals, sharks, etc, etc. A single female orca already is the weight of a large elasmosaur, and design wise, even if the orca was slightly smaller, it bodies the reptile. Like if it was a more robust marine reptile like a mosasaur or large pliosaur, the orca would likely get put down. But elasmosaurs and others in this group just aren't built for that fight life. Sure, they can definitely deliver painful bites, but in a 1v1, the orca's much more muscular build would give it the advantage. And what's worse is that they travel in pods. Elasmosaurs would not be accustomed to these new creatures today, but a giant dark silhouette in groups that aren't that far off from a mosasaur in the distance would send them packing, although there could be a chance a few are caught. Whilst they are in fact agile animals, they aren't the fastest. Not much research is done on the speed, but most sources don't put their top speed over 20 miles per hour. This is almost 2 times slower than the orca's 35 mile per hour top speed. The only advantage is that even though orcas do occasionally go on the beach to catch seals, they usually don't constantly hang out in shallow water, since the risk of beaching is a real thing, and the elasmosaur could use this to its advantage during certain parts of the year or even different times of the day when the orcas are hunting, because as I said, these orcas just pass by each year. They aren't year-long residents, so elasmosaurus would remain the largest predator for most of the year. Is it a top predator? Well, that depends. Large tiger and bull sharks can eat bigger things because of their build, but in a straight fight, elasmo would drive them off. You know what? It's the biggest predator and one of the top predators. But that's them as adults. As juveniles, it isn't looking as good. Some documentaries exclaim that they spend years with their calves, but as I said, there's no direct evidence to support that. They might stay with their calf side for a few months or up to a year, but even this is unconfirmed. But let's humor this and say that they do. Even with a small group and newly born calves getting guarded by mom, the sheer density of predators is just insane. Like I said, the amount of sharks littering the water here is insane. One of the biggest shark diversity hotspots. A unattentive mother could find herself without a calf if a tiger or large bull shark seizes the opportunity, which would then require another year of gestation. And when the juveniles do eventually leave their mother's side, they're going to be in even more trouble. If I had to guess, I would say they would go in the shallowest parts as juveniles until they're large enough to hunt with the adults in deeper water. But sharks of all species here can typically follow them into shallow water, aside from a big tiger shark, probably. But just like seals who aren't directly faster than sharks and great white in other parts of the world, they can outmaneuver them and prove not worth it. But I'm sure a few will be caught. When they reach that 1 to 2 ton size mark, they should be out of the blue, for the most part. Only a desperate tiger shark or arthropod would mess with them now. As for humans, well, this is one of those places where elasmosaurus would have almost no threat of that. Some fishing is allowed, but it's extremely strict, and most zones are just off limit. These waters are part of the Galapagos Marine Reserve, so most of the native wildlife is protected. Since early settlers, they outnumbered many animals back in the day. Only human related threats I would say are poachers, and they will be found, because many people dive in the Galapagos and some will of course see at least one elasmosaur. Too bad the guy who hoaxed Nessie likely won't be there to see it, but the species will be studied and the regulations may be even stricter now around the Galapagos. So, could elasmosaurs survive in today's water? Yup. They are actually the best marine species I've brought back. They have like an 85% chance of making it. The only caveats I see happening is the offspring being picked off too much by sharks, possibly seals and orcas, but for the most part they should do alright. However, the global destructions humans have caused will eventually affect them and other animals there, so for this video's sake I'll take out that factor. If the world somehow doesn't get worse from our actions and the ocean remains unscathed, elasmosaurs should do alright if enough offspring reach adulthood and establish small populations around the southern Pacific. And over a very long time, they could change, shrinking to 2 tons max and having long flippers and a more robust frame instead of the uneven build it had to deal with in the Cretaceous. This would allow for faster speeds above 30 miles per hour, and they would develop a relationship with dolphins, something seen in false killer whales and dolphins who sometimes mix pods and get along just fine with each other. It wouldn't be that tight-knit, but not too far off. Although there are many different species around the Galapagos, I'd say the spinner dolphins would evolve alongside elasmosaurus the most and form a symbiotic relationship, both using each other's assets to help each get food. This decrease in size would also ensure that they have the better odds of survival if they met an orc in the open. So overall, I'd say this species is by far the best marine animal I've brought back. It isn't a massive predator that requires large amounts of food, higher metabolism, or being way too specialized. I mean, Elasmosaurus is a specialist, well, kinda, but most of its prey including fish and squid can be found here, and they do just fine if humans don't destroy the planet. But let me know what you guys think. Could Elasmosaurus actually survive in today's waters, or am I just overhyping their abilities? Let me know. I'll see you guys later. Oh, and if someone can find the exact species of this elasmosaurus, please let me know.